Hello, I hope everyone's doing well, or as well as one can do. Last week, as I mentioned, my REL campaign, which I ran from R1 to R16, and all of these are available for pay what you want on DM's Guild, ended last week. And today, we're supposed to start the Abomination Vault. Interestingly, I was just on the phone talking to my buddy who's running it. He's having technical issues, in addition to being a philosopher, gamer. I'm also the tech support guy for all my friends and family. For those of you who do the same thing, you know what that's like. So while I love running games, it's good to get a break from it, if only from the purely practical thing of writing the adventures for the next campaign. And I'm currently working on C5, so I've got four adventures written so far for the next campaign, and hope to have lots of them in the adventure bank before it goes back to me running the game. So my playing character is JKO, a warforged fighter who will probably, assuming she survives, will become a cleric of Saren Ray. And Saren Ray is a Pathfinder deity, but Abomination Vault's a conversion from Pathfinder to 5e. She's one of 26 sisters, uh, which is kind of a device I've been using for my characters for quite a while. And the story of the 26 sisters begins with the first character of the Ko family called Oko. And yes, I started with the O, rather as we'll see, they're all, you know, each one is a single letter, and began with O because I didn't have this idea until after this character was killed. So before this campaign, which I was going to run Oko, before I knew I was going to run Oko, my friend Ron jokingly suggested that we play anime girls in the Pathfinder campaign coming up, and he was kidding. Uh, and since I've always played in D&D since the beginning, manly men, elfly elves, dwarfy dwarfs, orky orcs, etc., I thought it might be fun to play something, something different. So I created Oko, and I based this on the character of Gogo from Kill Bill. I just seen it and I thought, hey, that'd be an interesting character. And like Gogo, she had the spinny chain thing. You know, reskinned it so it looked like the, the thing she fought with, and she was a rogue and she did fairly well until she stopped doing fairly well. She was killed in a one-shot crit because Pathfinder, if anybody's played that, pretty brutal criticals. You could have these insane crits. And I think the monster who killed her was the Carrion King. And so I rolled in my next character. This one was a monk, and I thought, okay, this monk will be Aiko. And that's when I got the idea of the 26 sisters, all with the single letter name, first name, based on the alphabet. And Aiko survived and specialized in recruiting monsters, using violence and cigarettes. Oh, all the co-sisters are heavy smokers, which is fine in a fantasy game. I usually play classes that are either immune to diseases or can cure diseases, and the DM has never imposed, fortunately, the real effects of smoking. So in the real world, just say no to smoking. It's terrible. In the world where I'm a distance runner, so I definitely don't smoke. But it's the thing the characters do. Because when I grew up, smoking was like cool, even though it obviously kills you, and all the tough characters in movies, etc., did that. So the smoking is kind of a feature of the Ko characters. Iko was followed by the cleric Biko, who was one shot killed in a Pathfinder game by a critical hit. Again, those big criticals by a giant. She was trying to save a wounded, another wounded player character, and he survived. Biko didn't. Biko was replaced by Siko, was the next character, and Siko survived. After that, the next character was Deco. And Deco was a lot of fun to play. She was an anti paladin who thought she was a paladin. She was a Dampier, with a kind of like a PC version of, not politically correct, but a player character version of like a vampire like creature. And we were playing the Way of the Wicked, where you got to play evil characters. And I usually don't play evil characters, and I generally steer away from evil campaigns because when I was younger, like many new D&D players, people want to play evil characters. They usually just want to just be horrible. They want to do horrible things and try to like really disgust and annoy everybody at the table, and that's generally not a lot of fun typically. By the way, the Wicked did it really well. You were playing not really like cartoon villains, but not horrific. Not in a sense, not like true evil. You were kind of like bad guys, anti-heroes. And my kind of gimmick for Deco was that she thought, sincerely believed, had a deeply held conviction that she was still a paladin, and she would act upon that, always trying to spare people and trying to convince them to follow the path of good, which was very confusing to them because they were the good guys. She ended up as a vampire queen, and being undead and a vampire and an anti-paladin, she didn't need to worry about cancer from the cigarettes, although she kept smoking. When 5e came around, I played Eco, my first paladin, and of course, if you're not a paladin, you're little people. She was followed by Efko, a tabaxi rogue barbarian. I found that in the campaigns, I tend to die if I'm not a barbarian or a paladin, but I thought, hey, I'll try something, try playing a druid because Efko was a rogue with a level of barbarian, so she could soak up a ton of damage with those resistances. So I played JKO, made up this detailed backstory for her about her involvement with she was a drow, and her involvement with the drow and being like a spider themed druid, and this is all in the out of the abyss, and I picked a drow because it would fit into the theme of that pretty well with that campaign. She ended up being one shot by the hero's lightning bolt, just mega overkilled. This is a theme you probably noticed that if my characters get killed, it's always one shot, boom, mega damage, full hit points down to like back in Pathfinder, down below -10, or in the case of 5e, getting hit and taking so much damage that you get that that death, death rule. My replacement was HKO, who was, as probably has been foreshadowed, a barbarian paladin or a paladin barbarian, and HKO survived. High, damage resistance, self healing, good saves. The next campaign was a Curse of Strahd that I played in, run by Matt, and I played Aiko the Blasphemer, who was a Hexblade. Her signature moves were burning people with cigarettes and polymorphing into Sexy Rex, a T Rex, and murdering every enemy smaller than her, which is pretty much everything. That was kind of the go-to button. Big fight, boom, T-Rex, boom, murder, boom, victory. And I'd take a ton of damage. Typically in those fights in Strahd, spoilers, we'd end up with 2 or 3 party members down. We lost 3-player characters in the course of the campaign, but apparently Hexblade's a pretty survival when you turn into a T-Rex. So Aiko the Blasphemer survived. She was lawful good to the extreme. And when she met Strahd, she said to him, "You think you are the worst monster. My crimes are without number, my sins are beyond count. And when I am the last monster, I'll go back into the darkness and wait." And she did. She straight up murdered Strahd and then back into the darkness to wait for monsters to appear for her to destroy. So she was awful good. Now, while the co-sisters were always described by me as sisters, I was joking saying there were 26 co-sisters. That was just kind of the gimmick for these characters. Aiko was the first character that I actually thought about how this came to be and why Aiko was such an awfully good monster. This led to my soon-to-be character JKO. The game starts fairly soon, who might get one shot today because she's currently a fighter. Because her backstory and plan is to become a cleric. I'm all about characters with backstories and stories and personalities and kind of a plan, and then they often get get one shot. So the story of JKO and the 26 Sisters. So the character JKO, before she became JKO, was Juliana, and she was born in the city of Lander, which is one of the last living cities in the year of the Fox. 2 centuries earlier, An army of undead had emerged from the Underdark and set out to conquer the kingdoms of the living. In response, a band of heroes set out on an epic quest to find an artifact, the Light of Akal, which is said to have the power to redeem or destroy any undead creature. These heroes fell victim to their own egos, bickering about their goals, the division of treasure, and in the end, one hero sold the light, after they found it, to the leader of the undead, ensuring the doom of the world. Over the next 2 centuries, thousands of heroes perished trying to reclaim the light, adding their flesh and bones to the undead army. Juliana grew to adulthood, taking her family ordained path into the priesthood after serving the military, and as per family tradition, she served in one of the four fine legions protecting the city. On the field of battle, she met Veritas Thorn, of an ancient paladin lineage. The two married and had 3 children, and as more cities of the living fell, the population of Lander, her home city, was recruited and armed. As her husband and later her children fought in defense of the city, Juliana worked the forge, making weapons and armor for the people. But she had a kind heart and used the scraps to make toys for the children. One terrible day, her husband and sons perished in battle, their bodies taken by the enemy and reanimated with negative energy. Her daughter, Karasa, took command of the Fourth Legion, reinforcing it with what remained of the other legions. Though the Fourth Legion fought heroically, it was shattered, and Karasa's body was transformed into a Death Knight, and her, whatever she became, led the undead remains of the fallen soldiers to the city. Juliana made a last suit of armor for the last unarmed child of the city and joined the newly formed Fifth Legion, an amalgamation of the few survivors of the other legions, refugees from the other fallen cities, and anyone who could even attempt to fight. Lifting her hammer mercy, she strode onto the battlefield. The Fifth Legion held the city against the undead for 2 years, until all that remained were 500 soldiers. They managed to escape to the fortified island of Keros, where the last children of the city remained. Within a few months, the 500 were down to 50, 26 women and 24 men. No children remained alive. The undead had managed to infiltrate the fortress and transform them into all undead, and they had to be destroyed. Those did not escape. The 50 never spoke of that night again. The women soldiers named themselves Ko, an ancient word for sister. The men were the brothers. They were all great heroes, having honed their skills through countless battles. On each battlefield, Juliana left behind a piece of herself. Flesh and bone were replaced with steel, her heart was replaced with stone. In the end, nothing was left of Juliana, and only Captain JKO, combat support unit of the Fifth Legion, remained. As the 50 readied themselves for worse than death, the Death Knight with the stolen name and body of Karasa offered a parley in honor of her mother's 50th birthday. This honor would be a day of truce. Though the 50 suspected a trap, they did not waste the opportunity that it presented. JKO offered her prayers to her goddess, who responded by saying, "You're the last of my clerics. I offer you all the remains of my power, and now return to them." And then silence. Isabella Ko, as had become her way, offered only blasphemies and curses against the gods that she had believed in, and she believed now had abandoned them. And of course, Isabella became Iko, Iko the blasphemer, the source of her title. As her sisters and brothers prepared for the end, the mage Corella presented a desperate plan. She had learned that the gods of other realities had agreed to seal off this world, containing the infection of undeath. But the seal was imperfect. A god of knowledge had left what he believed was a one-way opening, allowing him to observe the fate of the doomed reality. Corella had devised a means by which the 50 could escape to other worlds. The energy required would tear their souls down to faint flickers and cast them randomly into other realities through that opening. As she explained, she handed out the rings of wishes, luck blades, cigarettes, and other items that she had hoarded. While some complained that these items should have been used much earlier, Corella convinced them that such use would have only prolonged and delayed the inevitable. Jaco realized then why Corella had asked her to make an implanted device that would destroy the mage utterly. This secret could not be allowed to fall into the hands of the undead. The 50 gathered, and after their last cigarettes, Corella and the other mages cast Wish, JKO and other clerics cast their last miracle, and the others activated items and read scrolls. Corella's plan worked. The souls of the 50 were all but extinguished, but they passed through the supposedly one-way portal and were scattered across the realities of the multiverse. JKO, always supporting her sisters and brothers, was the last through the portal, and the god that had created the weak point to spy through struck out at her, badly damaging her body and hurling her into a distant reality. But through some insane amount of luck, JKO survived the attack of the god and slammed into the swamp, a lucky landing that allowed her to survive, but just barely. Her damaged body lay dormant in the ground, and until she was disturbed by magical energy and awoke to see an undead creature shuffling in the distance. JKO pulled herself out of the muck, reaching for the absent Warhammer of Mercy. Finding that one leg was missing and the other shattered, JKO pulled herself after the undead, driven by her rage against the destroyers of her family and her world. The strain proved too much for her, and she lost consciousness, only to awaken months later in a strange temple. A kindly face looked down upon her, and a pleasant voice told her to rest. But JKO saw the undead creature she had followed approaching, rasping a warning out of her broken throat. She tried to cast Flame Strike, but nothing happened. Struggling upright, after finding that her legs had somehow been crudely rebuilt, she readied herself to protect her benefactor as best she could. I'm sorry, my god cannot help us. She is dead, she croaked, as she wished for even a mundane hammer to hurl at the oddly smiling undead horror. And that's the origin story of JKO and the 26 Sisters. The undead creature is actually another player character who is one of the reborn who looks like an undead creature. And that's the backstory for the start of the campaign. And if this character survives, it'd be interesting to see how the character develops. And if the character doesn't survive, the next one planned will be HKO, a wizard. That's have a tendency, the co-sisters have a tendency to die from critical hits. So stay safe, and I'll see you in